Так, пошел контент. Вроде как. Или не пошел, или пошел. Окей. Сегодня будем смотреть супер видос. Супер-мега видос. Вбрух. Какой-то популярный, довольно популярный, он видос рекомендует автор канала, автор блога. Я не знаю, что это за блог, правда. Ну, он что-то популярный какой-то чел в каких-то кругах. Вот. Еще сегодня что сделал? Нашел несколько фонов для игры. Чисто сэмпл фоны, так сказать, которые не попадут в игру, которые нужны просто для того, чтобы быть заглушками. Чтобы потом подставить вместо них уже нормальные фоны. Вот. Сегодня сделал, да, это вот примерно с 9 до 10 этим занимался. Сейчас этим занимаюсь. Так, ну все. Погнали, смотреть. Это будет React. Видос React. Так,
This will completely change how you think about game development. It's the best theory I've ever found. For why my games have succeeded so far. And in the context of game development, I've never seen this discussed before. Making a game is like running a search algorithm. You're searching for the best game you can possibly make. This is your boat, you're on a massive lake, and your goal is to find the deepest spot as quickly as possible. You can move, measure, or teleport to an already explored position. For example, we could move 4 times, make a measurement, move 9 more times, measure again, and then lock in our best result as our final answer. Have we found the deepest spot in the lake at this point? I would say fairly unlikely, right? The next captain comes along, says, I'll do better, I'll start with a measurement. They keep making regular measurements, and as soon as the water gets shallower, they turn the ship. They have a look at their data points and take an educated guess for where to explore next. The ship keeps exploring with this method, and then they lock in their best answer. And that's already better, but the third captain is a giga brain. The third captain first explores all directions, making use of the teleport ability. From there, the 2 most promising measurements are at the top and at the bottom.
Что быстро говорит. Сейчас.
So that's where he continues his search. From there we can use the strategy of the second captain, search around a bit more, and settle on the best result. Design is a search algorithm. As a game developer, you're searching for the best game you can possibly make. If your search algorithm is poor, you won't find it. How you search, in which order you try things, when, what you experiment with is absolutely crucial for your success. In this video we'll talk about how you can optimize your search as a game developer and hopefully turn you into a big brain cap. There are 7 main problems holding your search algorithm back, so let's talk about...
Что я пока не понимаю, this problem change your perspective on game dev. И нам говорят про какой-то search алгоритм. Потому что без него ничего не получится. Походи, мужик. I would recommend 100% recommend every game development watch because it feels like the best explanation of why so many games people make, myself included, are profoundly terrible. A good game is not made in a lab where careful types are crafted. It's made by a developer who is grandmaster player as a genre and who understands every aspect of the design and has tried to failed many things before reaching upon the final design. From scrapping a lot of bad ideas through another process. Ну, хорошо, да, сейчас.
How to solve every single one of them. The first problem almost all search algorithms suffer from is the speed versus accuracy trade-off. Your search algorithm can either be fast or it can be accurate, but unfortunately it cannot be both. You can either just drive in a straight lane and make occasional measurements to see if you're still on track, very fast but not very accurate, or you can drive a zigzag lane all across the lake and map out every single inch of it, very accurate but very slow. That means both of these strategies are flawed in their own way, and the sweet spot is somewhere in between. A fairly reasonable approach is, for example, to start with a slow but accurate search in all directions, and then to transition into a less accurate but much faster search. Go wide first and narrow later. This is not the only search strategy that works, but for indie games in particular, this is a very reasonable one. You have an exploration phase in the beginning where you try to figure out the best direction for you to go in. When Paul and I started making Thronefall, we tried out a crap load of different ideas, from multiplayer climbing games to games of about golfing flowers. Every experiment, every prototype is essentially a measurement how deep the water is to see if there's potential in this direction. In the end, the prototype we found most promising was this one here by Paul, where you control a little king and have to defend your kingdom from enemies at night. The next phase would be the pre-production, where you still want to do some active search to narrow in on the exact direction you want to go in. At this stage, Paul and I prototyped a very simple economy and combat system in Unity, while simultaneously doing some very active search and experiments on our art style. In pre-production you are still searching, just in a smaller radius, and then finally in production you sacrifice your search accuracy for speed, cause you want to finish your game someday.
Ага, то есть... то есть там человек на примере алгоритма поиска пути как бы говорит про вообще в принципе про разработку игр. Ну окей, хорошо, интересно. И так, наверное, будет со всеми остальными проблемами, да?
Thronefall, this meant rebuilding all of our systems from scratch. I rebuilt the combat system, Paul rebuilt the economy system. We put it all together in a little block out, and from there we just kept polishing until it looked like this. I think it is important to note that you should never stop search completely. You still want to do your occasional measurements, you want to do your occasional playtests, you still want to find the deepest spot in the lake, so every now and then you should just give yourself the opportunity to correct course if necessary. The local minimum, a very common problem in search algorithms. It basically describes the illusion of having found the deepest spot, because if you move forwards the water gets shallower, if you move backwards the water gets shallower. You logically conclude that you found the deepest spot already and that it doesn't make any sense to search any further. What you don't know is that there's a much deeper spot just a few more meters down the line. There's only one way to solve for this problem, and that is to dare bigger jumps in your search tree every now and then. Your production might be moving in a trench that you can't break out of by making small adjustments, but if you make a bigger jump and dare to cross the hill, you might discover that there's an even deeper trench on the other side. Attempting this is especially worth it whenever it is cheap to do so. The game Fortnite was initially meant to be some kind of base building tower defense game. That's why you have all of these building mechanics in there. But the development team was brave enough to dare one of those big jumps and try to make a completely different game mode. And that mode became one of the most played games in history. As the search space is so massive, it's almost guaranteed you're stuck in some kind of local minimum, which means you might have a Fortnite slumbering right around the corner and not even know about it. Surprisingly, there are a lot of opportunities to make big jumps in your search tree for very little effort. And whenever an opportunity like that presents itself to you, you should absolutely go for it. An obvious example would be game modes. Game modes are often very easy to make. You have all of the game systems, all of the game mechanics, all of the objects already laid out. Just change the objective, change a small thing, make a new game mode. Other obvious things would be completely rebalancing your game. Another way to get yourself unstuck from local minimums. One very brutal thing about local minimums is that you have no way of knowing if you are in one. So typically there doesn't even have to be a feeling of being stuck or anything like it. The opposite is the case, right? You're feeling like you're optimizing to the best of your ability. That means even if you feel like things are going well, give yourself the opportunity to break out of local minimums. Do it. You're not on a...
Так, что получается? Вторая проблема — это то, что необходимо немного как-то игру менять. Сейчас это может быть зашел в стрим. Нет, никто не зашел. Может, я слишком поздно сказал. Вторая проблема — это проблема, да, что необходимо периодически, ну или в качестве какого-то процесса закладывать время на то, чтобы там искать какие-то альтернативные пути, даже во время уже предпродакшн или продакшн. Потому что это вот некоторые изменения, некоторые модификации игры в виде там режимов игры могут сильно повлиять на успех. Могут вывести на какую-то такую логику, которая сможет потом дать очень много игре успеха. Вот. С маленькими усилиями.
Like you're on an infinite ocean. To make matters even worse, it's not even a two-dimensional ocean, it's a multi-dimensional ocean. There's an infinite amount of games you can make, which raises the question, how do you search an infinite search space? Well, I have a very sophisticated answer for you. You have to take a guess. But you don't have to do so blindly, you can do so using measurements from your database. Luckily for you, you're not the first person to ever make a video game. There are tons of video games out there already, and we roughly know if they succeeded or if they failed. On top of that, you have the experiences from your own past projects, and this is your personal database. Now, when guessing a direction, the safest thing to do is generally to pick a direction that has worked in the past, but to then search around those data points to make sure you don't make a game that exists already. Controversial statement. Unique selling points are overrated, because when somebody tells you you need a unique selling point, what they actually mean is don't freaking park your ship on top of another ship. Don't make a game that exists already, but worse. That is a horrible idea. On the other side of the spectrum, this ship is floating in a swirl of colors. Oh my god, so creative, but nobody can even tell it's a ship anymore. This is the equivalent of making a super innovative artsy-fartsy game that eventually nobody's interested in. Do not make a unique game for an alien species. We have no innovation on one side, we have too much innovation on the other side. Both of them are horrible, the sweet spot is in between. In order to find that sweet spot, you wanna be near other successful boats, but you wanna give them plenty of space and not really get too close to them. When somebody tells you you need a unique selling point for your game, what they really mean is you need to position yourself correctly on this innovation scale. The reason why I don't really like the unique selling point framing of this anymore is because I feel like it encourages too much innovation, or sometimes also pointless innovation. So while I technically agree and I'm talking about the exact same thing, I just feel like this innovation scale is a bit of a nicer way to frame it. Nurture your database a little bit, like play some other games, read the reviews, get some data from other games. You don't want to do all of the exploring yourself, and then freaking use that data to navigate this infinite search space, because the search space is massive. There are different search algorithms that make sense in different situations. For example, if you want to make a new indie game and you have no clue what to make, then go wide first and narrow later. Whereas if you're trying to search a specific corner, then go there first and then open up your search. The only thing that matters is that you open up your search eventually, because without search you can't find a good local minimum.
Что говорит, получается, да? Ну, короче, что не надо делать ее очень сильно уникальной, и лучше найти некоторые баланс между уникальностью, некоторыми уникальными, так сказать, отличительными особенностями, чтобы их не было прям очень много, чтобы в эту игру мог понять кто-то другой, да, игрок, например. И да, в конце он про что говорил, я так не понял. Ну, про то, что, как я понимаю, что сначала надо идти по какой-то верной дорожке, то есть про игры, которые уже достигли успеха. Сначала как бы пытаться их скопировать, а потом уже можно некоторые уникальные штучки добавлять. Вот. Как понимаю, так.
Chasing after the wrong
Хотя это, наоборот, противоречит. Короче, наверное, я плохо послушал.
thing is another very common problem in search algorithms, and that's also the case in game development. You think you want to make a viral game, whereas deep down maybe you just want some recognition and love. Congratulations, you found the deepest spot in the ocean, but now you figure out that you're a fishing boat and that there are no fish here. Making a game that brings you joy is a very different story from making a game for your portfolio, which is a very different story from making a game that is meant to commercially succeed. What you optimize for really matters. What gets measured gets improved. Most game developers try to optimize for revenue, which I guess makes sense, cause A, if you wanna keep making games, you need revenue, and B, in the indie game scene, revenue is a very good proxy for the quality of your game anyway. That means if your game is better, if more people enjoy your game, if people have a better time with your game, you're gonna make more revenue. So it's a win-win with the players anyway. Whatever goal you might have, you can probably split it into smaller derivative goals. In order to make revenue, in my opinion, you need three things. You need fun for keeping players, you need appeal for acquiring players, and you need scope for making sure that you can actually finish your game. I'll very briefly go through all of them, because I know a lot of you will be optimizing for these factors. The best theory of fun that exists so far is the one of flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Flow is the channel between boredom and frustration, where difficulty and skill are in a perfect equilibrium. It's honestly quite simple to wrap your head around, and the more you think about it, the more you realize that this applies to everything. Like any kind of player skill that can be tested, like comprehension, reaction times, strategic thinking, puzzle solving, is gonna create a lot of fun if you manage to put it into the flow zone. Yes, even the story of your game, like if you spell everything out, it's way too boring, and if it's way too complicated, then it's frustrating. One more framework that I think is useful to know is the Octalysis framework by Yukai Chu. It describes a related concept, which is motivation. It names 8 factors that can be used to motivate people. We have the intrinsic motivation sources at the top, the extrinsic motivation sources at the bottom, the creative motivation sources on the right, and the logical motivation sources on the left. So everything's quite neatly organized. It's always allowed to do some of your own theory crafting as well, of course. I made some cool videos about this already, like the fun button video, or a much older one where I talk about how to design choices that are fun. All in all, or a much older one where I talk about how to design choices that are fun. All in all, fun is a very well covered subject in game development. It's also very easy to measure. You just do some play tests, either with yourself or with other players. Remember that what gets measured gets improved, so if you want to improve the fun, then you have to measure the fun. Moving on to the next point, appeal is essentially another word for marketability. While fun is for keeping players, appeal is for gaining players. Appeal is the quality of a game that makes you go, I have to play that immediately. To demonstrate this, I brought you two screenshots. One is from my game Islanders and one is from my game Ouroboros. You could run the exact same marketing campaign on both of those games, but one of them would do significantly better. Can you guess which one? Having an appealing game makes marketing infinitely easier. It multiplies all of your marketing efforts. If you have a game that is 100 times more appealing, it is 100 times easier to market. Some developers only focus on the fun and forget about the appeal. And if you're trying to be commercially successful, that is crazy. You need appeal. Thronefall, so much easier to market than Will You Snail. Like, marketing wise, we did almost the exact same things, right? There are only a couple of standard things you can do for indie game marketing, and yet one of them is so much easier to sell and so much easier to market, and the only difference is appeal. There's not really any good theory crafting about appeal already out there, so I had to do my own. This is a Jonas original formula. Appeal is presentation plus fantasy multiplied by readability. Let's break it down. Presentation is exactly what you would expect. It's art, it's sounds, it's visual effects, it's polish, and it's juiciness. Here illustrated with a screenshot from Baldur's Gate. There are also more indie-friendly ways to achieve the same thing with low-poly art styles, like here with our game Islanders. Or you can even just go for pure juiciness, like in One Finger Death Punch. Fantasy is a bit more difficult to explain, but I would say it's basically about the question whether it's an experience people actually crave, and more specifically, it's about role-playing. A good fantasy is something that people would like to experience in real life, but can't experience in real life, either because it is too dangerous or because it is not practical. A great example for this is Superflight, where you fly in a wingsuit. Flying in a wingsuit is something a lot of people would like to do, but unfortunately it is just too dangerous and not practical for most people. And guess what? That's exactly where games can help. You can really find fantasies that work in very unexpected places sometimes. The other example I brought for you is Power Wash Simulator, a game about pressure washing. What matters are the positives of a fantasy, because the negatives are something you're just gonna remove from the game. In Power Wash there are no angry customers you have to deal with, you don't have to do any bookkeeping, you just do the fun part. And the lesson from this, and also from games like Euro Truck Simulator, is that people are interested in real life fantasies that are somehow grounded in reality. Also all of those typical childhood fantasies, being a king, being a pirate, building a theme park, being a hero, going on some kind of epic adventure and saving the world. All in all, just things we would all love to do in real life, but for one reason or another can't. It is important to note that not all fantasies are created equal. Some fantasies attract more players than others. That's why it's important to pick your fantasy very carefully. And not only does it matter which fantasy you pick, it also matters how much you manage to live up to that fantasy. Players want to feel it. They want to be fully immersed in the fantasy you're delivering. Can you make a game with no fantasy at all? Yes, you can. It's called abstract games, but in that case your presentation better be on point. You can, however, not make an appealing game without having readability. Readability is absolutely key. Readability means how easy is the game to understand from just seeing a screenshot or from just seeing a few seconds of gameplay. Can you tell which fantasy the game delivers just based on seeing a screenshot? Can you tell what the gameplay is about just from seeing a few seconds of gameplay? In case you do not know about this game here, then try to guess what it is about. Alright, and now we will look exactly at 2 seconds of gameplay. And I think at this point all of you will have guessed that this is indeed a game about climbing. This game is called A Difficult Game About Climbing by our fellow YouTuber Прототип. Put it on your wish list. In my opinion, the readability of this is absolutely excellent. You can just have a very quick glance at this and you immediately know what the game is about. There is some intentional resemblance to Bandit 40's Getting Over It. Being compared to other games is not always pleasant, but if it helps your readability, it can actually be worth it. Readability is the bridge between presentation, fantasy and gameplay. The presentation must communicate the fantasy and the gameplay. This is a screenshot from Snakebirds, and just by having a glimpse at this, you immediately know that this is a puzzle game because of the blocky nature of it. You know that it's kind of a cute game, and you know that you're likely gonna control these little sausage bird thingies. So from one single screenshot we could just immediately understand and grok the entire game. For our indie game Thronefall, the readability is good, but people sometimes think it's a classical RTS game just because it looks like that. So what I'm really just trying to say is the more you can get your presentation to explain the game for you, the better. That was the quick summary for how to create appeal. The only other thing you need to optimize for revenue is scope, because it turns out we don't just care about revenue. We care about revenue or return per investment, meaning that if there are 2 equally sized pools of fish, we want to go to the closer one. If you go for the patch of fish that is further away, you might even run out of fuel and not make it at all. The good old keep it small, keep it simple, keep it tiny. For some reason a lot of developers still think that tiny games cannot succeed, but the opposite is the case. Like in the indie arena, tiny games can do extremely well. Put quality over quantity, keep the scope small. Optimizing for the wrong thing hurts a lot. So what should you optimize for? If you're going for revenue, then you should optimize for fun, appeal and scope. And that means right from the beginning, not as an afterthought. I have to admit, I'm a bit of a formula lover, so for all of the formula lovers, this is the formula you want to optimize. Problem 5, another very common problem in search algorithms: noisy measurements. You're all excited about all of the fish you found, whereas in reality you're just floating on top of a bunch of poop particles. This most commonly happens if you have only one playtester.
Что? Я что-то не понял по скопу.
Revenue or return per investment, meaning that if there are 2 equally sized pools of fish, we want to go to the closer one. If you go for the patch of fish that is further away, you might even run out of fuel and not make it at all. The good old keep it small, keep it simple.
Все, понял. Короче, да. Что мы узнали про 4-ю проблему? Что у нас, во-первых, есть, что у нас главная цель, да, игры — это некоторое вознаграждение, которое мы получаем. Чтобы получить больше вознаграждения. Ну, как я понимаю, это Имеется в виду и денежное, и, так сказать, социальное какое-то, да? Ну, чтобы наш продукт соответствовал трем критериям. Fun, appeal и scope. Fun это у нас что такое fun? Фан это у нас, когда игрок не слишком фрустрирован и ему не слишком скучно. Вот. То есть он не переусложненный и не казуальный слишком. Достаточно для его опыта игры, да. Что такое? Дальше у нас что это? У нас это appeal. Appeal это то, как игра выглядит. Вот она делится на 3 части, да. Что у нас есть некая презентация. То, ну, например, это какой-то... Это то, как у нас выглядит. Картинка выглядит, да. Звуки, эффекты. Тут еще есть juiciness, то есть, как я понял из видоса, это увлекательность. Вот. Окей, ладно. У нас тут что? Ну окей. Допустим, если взять какой-нибудь... Я что-то вспомнил про бесконечное лето. Там же и хорошие арты, и звуки, и эффекты. Ну, да. И сюжет вроде какой-то есть. Вот. Ну как, хороший сюжет относительно. Да. Потом у нас еще есть фэнтези. Фэнтези это, то есть, то, насколько игра то, насколько это как бы story rich, так называемая игра. Сколько она уникальна в плане сюжета, наверное, да, в качестве игрового опыта или не игрового, а вот такого эмоционального опыта. Во, так. И он там приводит пример, что самый минимальный фэнтези это именно у логических игр, где просто ты двигаешь какие-то точки. Вот. И у нас еще есть readability, насколько просто человеку за пару слайдов, за пару секунд понять вообще суть произведения. Вот. Ну, для меня это не так сильно касается, потому что ну да, типа там открыть, просто показать, что вот там текст меняется, человек клацает, текст меняется. Вот так весь геймплей.
Baldur's.
Так, еще у нас есть scope, да. Scope. Это что у нас? Это у нас... Это то есть нужно использовать свои ресурсы для того, чтобы решать самые простые задачи, те задачи, которые принесут больше всего результата, пользы. Вот. Потому что если если идти в какую-то там глубь далекую, то можно перегореть и вообще ничего не сделать. Насколько я понимаю, так.
Optimize. Problem 5, another very Lisp to admit, and that means right from the beginning, so extremely well. Put quality over quantity, keep the scope small. Optimizing for the wrong thing hurts a lot. So what should you optimize for? If you're going for revenue, then you should optimize for fun, appeal, and scope. And that means right from the beginning, not as an afterthought. I have to admit, I'm a bit of a formula lover, so for all of the formula lovers, this is the...
Окей. То есть, чтобы ревеню был больше не... Чтобы ревеню был довольно... Ага, ну, окей. Чтобы скорее было самое максимальное, нужно, чтобы игра была увлекательная, чтобы, ну, чтобы был привлекательный сюжет, чтобы она была привлекательна, то есть, чтобы были хорошие картинки, все такое, звуки. И чтобы минимальное необходимое количество тем затрагивалось для того, ну, в сюжете. Вот, чтобы она не была вообще про все, а чтобы была именно что-то конкретное. Вот.
Formula you want to optimize. Problem 5, another very common problem in search algorithms, noisy measurements. You're all excited about all of the fish you found, whereas in reality you're just floating on top of a bunch of poop particles. This most commonly happens if you have only one playtester, yourself. Because all of our judgment is clouded sometimes. But even if you have more playtesters, this is a very common problem. You will have some noise and some inaccuracies in your measurement. The solution is to become a scientist and to just simply measure twice where it matters. Let some time pass, let the feelings cool down. The poop might just float away. Exploration costs.
Я немного не понял, что имеется в виду вот. Ну, имеется в виду, что мы можем заниматься какой-то ерундой.
More playtesters. This is a very common.
А
The
что?
solution is to become a scientist
Так.
and to just simply measure twice where it matters.
Что измеряет важно? Я немного не понял. Что...
Let some time pass, let the feelings cool down.
А, ну да, понял, да, что все, надо типа немного сделать игру, ее это самое, чтобы она постояла, и тогда можно начать снова. Ну, потому что. Потому что когда ты в процессе разработки, ты на позитивчике, так сказать, у тебя постоянно что-то меняется. Ну, то есть на позитивчике, потому что твоя игра постоянно улучшается, движок дорабатывается, баги решаются, все хорошо. А когда человек, он как бы без этого не видит все это, ему как бы не понять, что это нечто там гениальное или что это вообще написано на Haskell.
Poop might just float away. Exploration costs. How can you afford all of this expensive exploration? Wouldn't you arrive at your goal much faster if you left out all of these unnecessary search paths? There you have the quick answer. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't even know the best direction to go in. You might have the illusion of going fast, but you would be going in circles. You would notice your mistakes too late and you would end up with a suboptimal design. Don't be afraid of exploration costs. The lack of exploration is far more expensive. With that out of the way, I have to agree though, you want to minimize the cost of exploration as much as possible. Minimize the cost of exploration so you can explore more. Not so you can explore less, so you can explore more. Because the cheaper your exploration, the more of it you can afford to do. The cheapest form of exploration you'll use most often is prototyping. A prototype is like a tiny scouting boat. Your main boat is big, heavy and slow, and it's not very suitable for fast exploration, but your scouting boats are. A prototype is a very quick and scrappy version of whatever you want to try. So should you build perfect production ready code when prototyping? Hell no, because I've been asked this before. The only thing you care about when sitting in a speedboat, in a scouting boat, is going fast and making a halfway decent measurement that's roughly in the correct ballpark. Those are the only two things you care about when prototyping. So Take shortcuts. Go as fast as possible. Do not focus on writing clean code. That does not matter at this point. Depending on your specific search strategy, you can send scouting boats throughout the entire process whenever you want. If you're already a bit further into the process, then it can sometimes make sense to actually scout with your main fishing boat. If whatever you want to build relies on a lot of existing systems, then obviously you prototype that right into your game. You don't start a new Unity project and make everything from scratch just to try out an idea. The rule of thumb is you do whatever is fastest. Whatever is fastest, that's what you do. And for that exact reason, you should always prototype art and gameplay separately. You wanna know what happens when you build gameplay and art at the same time? It's called making the game. You're not prototyping anymore, you're just making the game. And you're losing all of the speed advantages that come with prototyping. So building art and gameplay separately is crucial. It gives you a massive speed boost. I'll give you an example. When we made our game Islanders, this was our visual prototype, and there's no gameplay in this whatsoever. You can move the camera and toggle a bunch of buildings on and off, but that's it. As there was no gameplay to worry about, our artist Friedemann could explore a lot more freely and a lot faster than he otherwise could have. The gameplay was prototyped separately with a bunch of blocks and boxes that looked like really ugly programmer art. That allowed us to experiment with a lot of different ideas and to iterate quickly. Rule of thumb, systems that are separate from one another should be prototyped separately from one another. That way you are much faster and you stay more agile during the process. Additional bonus, your measurements will be more precise because you're not adding any unnecessary noise to your prototypes. We did the same for Thronefall. Our gameplay prototypes did not have any art and our art prototypes did not have any gameplay, and we were significantly faster because of that. Another thing you can do to reduce exploration costs is to parallelize, send multiple scouts at once. Especially in indie teams, ever only put one person into a scouting boat. It's better to have more scouting boats than to have bigger scouting boats. If you ever have idle team members sitting around, put them into a scouting boat immediately. Speed up the evaluation of your prototypes. Take shortcuts wherever you can when scouting. And speed up the decision making in your team. I have observed this with my own eyes. A lot of teams love discussing. They love the decision making process. They're like, great, if we talk we don't have to work. And then they spend hours and hours and hours discussing where to send their scouting boats, and it would have arrived 2 days ago if they had just sent it. Perfect gateway to the next problem.
Так, во. Чё, да, довольно хорошая вещь. Типа. Я немного не понял про то, что... Сейчас. Мне кажется, формулировка тут не очень хорошая. Minimize... ну правильно. Minimize cost.
Of exploration you'll use most often, though, you want to
да, minimize cost of exploration. Да, и там говорится, чтобы больше как бы экспериментировать. И он говорит, и он приводит как бы два проявления этого момента, два проявления этого аргумента проблемы. Как, короче, два способа решения этой проблемы, да. Минимизации затрат на изучение. Во-первых, нужно делать небольшие какие-то прототипы. То есть не с исходной базы данных, не с исходным кодом, или даже с исходным кодом, но чтобы максимально там было мало проверок и всего подобного. Максимально мало проверок и всего подобного. И чтобы... Вот. То есть нужно экспериментировать с какой-то базой данных. Кодовой базой экспериментировать, да. Ну, скорее всего, надо же иметь, наверное, хороший еще core отрефакторенный. Вот. Чтобы туда можно было просто добавлять какие-то изменения и смотреть, как они будут отказаться, как они будут чувствоваться. Вот. И как понимаю, то есть аргумент там в том, что ну, типа мы смотрим на какую-то фичу, она взлетает, не взлетает. Если она хорошо выглядит, то оставляем, если плохо, то не оставляем. И не изменять сразу всю кодовую базу, чтобы вот эту фичу реализовать, а изменять только то, что нужно. Это может быть не очень красиво, но не очень правильно, но так надо. И второй момент, он говорит про то, что нужно и ассеты, и сам геймплей развивать отдельно. Но это, кстати, очень такая огромная крамола, потому что изначально так кажется. Изначально кажется, что вот у нас есть игра, и она вот типа развивается линейно. Вот. Там сразу и код, и сразу как бы картинки рисуются. Не, там так не будет.
Of thumb, systems that are separate from one another should be prototyped separately from one another. That way you are much faster and you stay more agile during the process. Additional bonus, your measurements will be more precise because you're not adding any unnecessary noise to your...
Да.
Perfect gateway to the next... And it would have arrived 2 days ago if they had just sent it. Perfect gateway to the next problem. Most game dev teams these days have multiple decision makers. This is the multiple captains problem. Both captains are sent on a scouting mission to find the perfect pool of fish, and they both return with great news. They both claim that they just found the perfect spot and that the ship should follow. And now we have a problem, because now they will get stuck in endless discussions and in endless arguments. And the problem is humans suffer from a lot of biases. One of them is sunk cost fallacy. So if you invest a lot of time into something, then you do not want to throw that work away. That is a very human thing to do and to want. So both of these captains are simultaneously suffering from sunk cost fallacy, and this can get surprisingly emotional if you don't address it. In the subtext there can easily appear something like, I'm the better captain, you went in the wrong direction, you are a worse captain. There are a couple of naive solutions. For example, one I can think of is, let's do both. If we can't agree, then let's just do both. Let's meet in the middle. And that is one of the worst things you can do. It clutters up your game, it leads to scope creep, and in the end nobody will be entirely happy with it anyway. You can make the entire team vote, but that does not solve the emotional aspect of this problem. I've really only come across one good solution for this problem so far. The two captains need to use the teleport ability, switch places, and continue the search from the other captain's position for a bit. This does two fantastic things. Firstly, it removes the emotional aspect, because now both captains have invested an equal amount of time into each idea. And secondly, it brings a new perspective to each of those search branches, making those ideas only better and better. You will be surprised how much of a rational argument people can all of a sudden have. Before we decided on making Thronefall, I made this prototype, a cute little game about golfing flowers, and I was convinced there was a lot of potential in this idea. So we switched prototypes, and Paul kept developing the idea a bit further, turning it into something that looks like this. And Paul reported back to me with some roadblocks he discovered that he thought would be very difficult to overcome. So even though I was very in love with the idea, at this point this was not my baby anymore, this was our baby, and after talking it out, I had to agree. This was not gonna work. Another thing that can be very useful when having multiple captains is to split responsibilities a little bit. For example, you can have one captain that always has the last word on art decisions and one captain that always has the final say in gameplay decisions. In this case, both of the captains can run their own experiments in their own domain, they send out their own scouting boats, and they're not gonna get into direct conflict as much. Also, don't have so many captains. You can also have some regular crew members. Crew members kinda need to act like mini captains. They need to run a little bit of search in their own domains, but where to steer the ship as a whole, that is for the captains to decide. The decision-making process needs to be fast, and having too many decision makers leads to way too much friction. Here are some red flags that tell you exactly when your search algorithm is not working.
Так, ага, ну вот, получается, что у нас? Нужно иметь не очень много этих самых капитанов, которые ведут наш корабль к успеху. И если это бывает, то решение автора идет в том, чтобы менять авторов, капитанов местами. Ну, эта проблема возникает из-за того, что мы много времени проводим. Ну, то есть нам очень сложно выбросить какую-то свою работу, если мы провели за нее очень много времени уже. Вот. И в качестве решения автор предлагает менять капитанов местами, чтобы они пытались развивать. Что это? Шок. Шок. Да.
Efficiently. Number one, you never scrap any of your work, cause that means you don't even have any search branches. At this point, you're just guessing the best direction and following your nose. While this feels efficient and it feels like you're not throwing anything away, it will lead you into a very poor local minimum. I can already think of 2 cases where this happened to me. One time with Will You Snail, where I did not spend any time on the character controller. I just made one character controller for my jump and run game and just rolled with it. I did not experiment with it whatsoever. There was no search there. I just winged it and build a 4-year project on top of it. That is crazy. The other time where this happened to me is with the economy in Thronefall. I pretty much only had 1 or 2 attempts at balancing the economy in Thronefall, and we pretty much ended up with an economy that is extremely snowbally. So either it will completely exponentially escape and you become way too powerful, or you don't build any economy and you become way too weak. So it is extremely snowbally in both directions. And now it is too late to change it. I feel like I would step on too many players' foot if we make any big changes now, because a lot of players like it the way it's now, and it's, you know, it's kind of too late to make any adjustments. So I just wish I had run more experiments with the economy of Thronefall early on to make it less snowbally. If you never scrap any of your work, that means you're not taking full advantage of the search space available to you, and you're likely missing out on a lot of great opportunities to improve your game. Secondly, you constantly scrap your work. That means one of 3 things: either you have commitment issues, you have decision-making problems, or your database is flawed and you are exploring in completely nonsensical directions. Thirdly, you scrap your work way too late. This is usually just a different symptom of the same problem. You keep going in one direction without any exploration, and then suddenly you realize you ended up in a dead end. Before making Thronefall, we spent 2 months on making a card game just before scrapping the whole thing. This can also happen when you don't measure correctly, you make some noisy measurements, and you waste 2 months of your time. 2 months is the best case scenario. If you're uncareful, you can waste years. 4th red flag, your game failed, you end up with no fish. If that ever happens to you, you should never think, oh crap, my game failed. You should think, oh crap, my search algorithm failed. What can I do to improve my search algorithm next time? There are only 3 main things to remember from this video. You are running a search algorithm because design is a search algorithm. You are searching for the best game possible. If you want to delight as many players as possible or maximize your revenue, then aim for fun, appeal, and a reasonable scope. Fun is for keeping players, appeal is for gaining players, and scope is for making sure you can finish the game. Think optimize your search, because the success of your project depends on it.
Окей, напишу в телеге, в группе, ну, все комментарии по поводу нашей работы. Вот. Ну, тьфу ты, напишу комментарии по поводу этого видоса.